We got 20
I
seconds.
think it's about time to start.
20 seconds.
Okay.
So I want to watch back so I can actually tell how many seconds.
I'll talk quieter now, but I've got a mask on too. I'm not sure if it's any quieter than anybody else, but it's quieter than me.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's 6:30. I'll call the meeting to order. So, first item on the agenda is the 2021 budget, the proposed budget final review. Ed is here to talk about any questions, comments, concerns that we may have.
Yeah, I think a lot of our discussion was geared towards ending balances last time. So what I did is on page 2 of the packet, and then I handed out the exact same copy. Just easier to look at. What I did is took all our governmental funds, because I think when we go through this 50-page budget, we think, you know, some of the water and sewer funds are available for spending, and you get very confused very quick when we talk numbers. So this is just a real simple summary of our governmental funds, which would be funds we can actually dictate where that goes. And what I did is took out all the transfers amongst the funds, so that we're seeing apples to apples. And basically, this is with spending maybe $800,000 out of the Capital Improvement Reserve Fund. Total fund reserves would be at around 40% of revenues. Now, the big asterisks that I'll put in, I did not include the bond and interest fund on this because it's really, a lot of it's supported by special assessments, and it kind of throws off us a little bit, but I did run the calculation, and if we wanted to add the bond and interest to this calculation, it would move it down to about 34% of reserves to revenues. So that's something to note, but this is just a 30,000-foot view of what we do with basically the general fund and the transfers we put in to service maybe PBC debt, the land bank specials and whatnot. So that's basically the only new thing I presented. The rest are in the tables. As you see, there's really nothing changed from last workshop. I did get rid of a lot of the stuff that might have looked confusing. These are just basic finance tables, but we can go through in each section if anybody has any questions. Okay.
Okay.
Ted, just a clarification that I want to make sure straight in my mind, and I keep looking at this, and then I know I knew the answers to these questions before, and I no longer remember. In the mayoral council expenses on page 12, I think the professional dues / memberships, the 10,000 extra there, I think that was for the city, for the Chamber of Commerce.
It was.
And they are not requesting that this year, so I'm wondering if for clarity we should move that to where it was before, because I think we took that out of the events section, and so should we be moving that 10,000 out of the professional dues and memberships and put it back into what it will actually get used for? And I know they may request it again in future years, and we can talk about that. And I don't know what they'll do, I guess, but it seems like for clarity for this year we should move it. Am I understanding that right as far as Ted and everyone else?
You're right on. That is at, if you move to page 10, line 21, community relations and events under recreation. That amount there was what we spent on community events and festivals. So really, I wouldn't move it back to events and festivals. I would, if you want, we can move it to transfer for streets or whatever we want to do with that extra 10,000. or you can keep it in the underlying budget.
Yeah, I would take it
Take it
out of
off.
here, and
Okay.
if you want to move it to streets or just make the budget 10,000 cheaper, unless someone has.
We can
some
move it
thoughts.
anytime we want, right?
Anytime, yeah.
I would leave it in there for right now, just in case we decide to do something with the chamber next year, and if we don't, we can move it later. It's not like it's a huge amount, and we can move it to festivals, like in the fall or something, if we don't spend it with the chamber.
So let me ask just a quick question, procedure-wise. If we decide to move it later, do we have to do a resolution, or we just say, hey, do it, or what?
Nope.
Yeah, so everything in the general fund budget really comes together, so all these departments you're looking at are all under the general fund. So what could happen is you leave it there, and you decide to give the chamber that money. It could come out of your expense, or if you moved it over to rec, it could come out of rec. But if you leave it there, let's say the chamber doesn't want to do anything, and you say, well, let's spend 10,000. So the line item in rec could go over 10,000, and doubt if the overall budget for rec would go over, but let's say it did, then you'd be 10,000 under the council. And really, you would just realize that, we spend it out of the general fund. So,
Mayor,
Okay, thank you. Mr. Smith?
I was just going to say that I agree with Councilmember Schroeder's comments on it, kind of coming off of that line, and there is the chance, of course, that we'll want to do something different, as we progress into the budget year. But as of right now, the best knowledge that we have is that we don't intend to do that, and I'd kind of like for this to reflect our intentions based on the best knowledge that we have right now of what we're going to do.
Because it seems to me like leaving it there, but not, at best we know, not actually using it for that, and we'll just move it to something else, is not giving the most clear intentions of our budget that we could. Even though I know 10,000 is not a crazy amount or whatever, but just a random jump in $10,000 line item for someone in the public just catching that, and we're saying what we're doing with it. We don't know. We're going to decide later. That even though I know that's not a huge amount, just maybe a little more clarity. Even though we know as the year goes along, changes are made, and we can't predict the future, and we might have to do some different things or whatever. But
Well, if you really want to do that, then I'd put it into the reserves, because we can take it out of there easier than we could take it out of rec.
I'm good with that.
And really, all that would take is just me turning it back into 7.7, and then we're good.
Okay. I'm okay with it either way. So. Any other questions for Ted?
I think we're going to show a loss on water, right? For the year, line 8.
Yeah, we're, memory serves me correct, we're taking some, lowering the reserve amount for 2020. Yeah, and most of that's due to, water system improvements. It's not an operations type of negative balance or negative operating balance, but it's more of let's do a project, let's lower some reserves, because we ended 2019 with rather large reserves. You see that on page 20.
Right. And the other question I got is, did we budget, can't really tell it in here, for at least one or two maybe replacement sump pumps, the new pumps that we just approved, the $50,000 pumps?
Yeah, those would be in sewer lift station pumps.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's what I was
and,
trying.
is that what you? Yeah, sorry.
That's what I'm asking about, if we budgeted to
Yep.
replace at least one or
That would
two of
be on
those.
page 21, and it'd be line 57, wastewater system maintenance and reserves. Or actually, it can come out of either one of 56 or 57, depending on how many clogs we have. Lift station operations is one of the hardest things to budget for, because you just don't know when a pump's going
Yeah,
to go
well,
down.
even without the clogs, the pumps are getting old,
They are, yeah.
so.
And we're going from 4 to 5, which always creates issues.
But we're gonna put the cutter pump in the new one, right?
Yeah, I think so. That's Ann's decision.
Okay. Ms. Stetson, did you have something you wanted to bring up?
Yes, I did. Back on the deal that Dr. Schroeder was talking about. And I probably missed this just somewhere, if I watched them, that I haven't.
Sure.
On that mayor council on page 12. To me, that utilities really jumped. Did I miss something on there? It went from 1,300 to 13,000.
I think we caught that the last time. and
Yeah,
we
I'm
didn't
gonna have
fix
to
it.
take that. Sorry.
No, that's fine, I just didn't know.
I appreciate it.
You were shuffling things around, so I thought, well, I probably wasn't paying attention or dismissed it. And then, that chamber thing that you were talking about, the $10,000, I was thinking you were gonna put 6,000 of that 10,000 into the festival, so really, you only have 4,000 to put in reserve, don't you?
So.
Or is that not true?
So, we were debating that back and forth, and I think at the end of that meeting, we just decided to fully fund both and then
Okay.
have the conversations
Okay.
with one or the other. So, so I fully funded the city festivals the way we normally have, and then, now that we're not doing the chamber, we can take the whole 10,000 down to the reserves.
Okay. And, the contract service went up from 5,000 to 11.
So,
I guess I missed that.
yeah, so part of Ms. Kelly's contract is the city must provide a code database software system and we've actually had that in the budget the last several years. We just haven't gone through all the executed it. So that's more of the 5,000. It's the actual amount's around probably 6,100, and then the code system's about 5,000.
Okay, that's fine.
Sure.
Is everybody done? Or do you have more questions?
Sounds good.
I don't mean to put anybody on the defense, I just am trying to understand this a
Sure.
little better. I thought we were gonna do, okay, on page 13, line 6, and there again, I might have missed it.
Sure.
I thought there was talk about not doing away with the credit card processing fee for 2021, was that reversed?
Yeah, so the processing fee is on the customer, so doing away with it on the customer, it'd be due by the city, so that's what,
Okay.
so it'd be an expense
So I
to the city,
misunderstood.
yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
And speaking of that, that's good. I just ran a report, and I wish I should have brought it. Credit card processing is up probably 40% from earlier this year to now. So people are starting to utilize our online systems more, and they're starting to pay online a lot more with their credit card. I don't think it has a lot to do with, I mean, it might have a little bit to do with no fee, but I think a lot of it is I've seen users that go on and actually create a profile online is now up to about 700. It was about 400 in February. I might do a special report on that, but I just wanted to get that quick information for you.
Well, just to help confirm that, I am doing an audit with a fairly large company. Most people would recognize if I mentioned it today. I won't mention them because of confidentiality, but they have seen their online business jump 30% as of COVID. Their in-store business has been flat or down, but their online business has jumped 30%. They can't keep up. They can't get enough employees. They can't. Same old problem that other places are having.
The time
Can't get employees.
savings of someone paying online to our staff is pretty substantial, especially with the new software we purchased last year, year before, because it just automatically uploads to our
Right.
system. It doesn't require us to run a check through the system, scan the check to the bank, and then,
Yeah.
bundle the check and then destroy the check. Yeah, it's just, it's hard to calculate, but it's about 3 minutes a check of staff time versus, 2 seconds when you're doing it.
Yeah.
Well, even the credit card processing is faster than when you first started. That was kind of clunky too.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember talking to you two,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it was, and I came out going,
Yeah. Were there any other questions? Oh, you gonna keep us for a while?
I understand it's forgive me, but I'm trying to play an active role in here.
All right. No, we appreciate it.
Let's see, we have the state budget form. Something, I wanted you to kind of explain to me what this was. It's on page 7A, right?
Yeah.
Of the form. You're probably familiar with it. Or do you-
Well, that's not this form. You were talking about the state
No,
budget,
Yeah,
so,
I
okay.
talked about the state form, but I can go back to the budget if you want.
No, go right ahead.
Flipping around, because I just going through my notes.
I don't think we have that. No, language.
Yeah, I didn't include that, I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I can.
Okay.
Well, that's okay, then
No, that's all right.
I can send it to you in an email.
And I imagine what some of your questions on the form, so, the state budget, you have to basically create your mill levy, and that's where it gets a little confusing. The way I do it is, make sure we hit that mill levy, and then, because it's based on, it's really meant for maybe cities that are 300 in population, you have a part-time person trying to do the budget, and they make every city do it. So what they try to make it foolproof, meaning I need $30,000 this year, so they just put $30,000 into expenditure, and the mill levy automatically calculates. We don't have to get too far into it, but I'm sure that we can talk, Bonnie.
Yeah, mine was more about the delinquent comp rate.
Okay.
It was like 4%, and I didn't get, because last year's didn't have that. So I
Yeah,
don't know where that fell into
that's-
place.
That's a little bit into, we delayed some abatements, and then also what I'm seeing is being a little cautious on our usual delinquent comp rates around 1.5%. So I typed in 4 to make sure we'll have enough. It doesn't have any effect on the mill levy.
It doesn't. Okay,
It's
that's
more
what
of,
I was
it's more of just the same reason you only budget sales tax to go up a certain percentage. It's basically making sure we're going to hit the property taxes that's inside the budget.
Okay, great. Sounds good. My last question is, on the street fund, right? Page 26, I guess. Page 26, okay. Yeah. Okay. On line 46, you have the street material for the gravel, which I'm sure is coming out of this Aurora Park thing. My concern is that you have not budgeted enough, and the reason is because at the meeting we had, we were told that you spend $33,500 a year on our roads. And if you're only budgeting $10,000, that's not gonna cut it.
Yeah.
Is it?
So really what the idea was is to set I'm sure Ann was guesstimating on what we spent on the 30,000 on the Aurora Park roads. I'm not sure where that number came
Because
from.
she would have included things like grading, staff time for that, and I assume maybe.
Yeah, so I think, I'll ask Bonnie. I think, because I don't have it in front of me, I think, Bonnie, you're saying that we average 3,000 so much per mile. If you take that times however many miles there are, it comes up to that 30-some thousand. Is that the number,
Well,
or I don't have it in
Yeah,
front of me?
And really, this is kind of obtuse.
Okay.
It's not matching apples to apples, but
Yeah,
this says that you spent roughly $33,500 per year, or approximately $13,000 a mile at 2.8 miles, which that doesn't even calculate right. That
Okay.
can't be right. And you're talking about a maintenance cost on the gravel road. So maybe maintenance doesn't include the gravel. I
yeah.
don't know.
So I
You
think,
know, maintenance to me is the whole ball of wax.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not.
I think that amount includes like labor and stuff, and this, again, just trying to figure out what an average mile costs, and not that we fix every mile or spend that every mile. And so I'm thinking that there's two pieces. One is this is just the material, and I think that also that the average, let's say we spend 10,000 plus labor and stuff and we figure that amount, and then we spend X number of hours fixing potholes and the amount of potholes, I'm thinking. But I'll have to look at that to make sure. I know this just includes material.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this was split out into gravel roads over what hard surface maintenance is.
Right.
And it doesn't tell me how many miles this is, or, you know, but this kind of drew a red flag for me.
Right.
When I saw that, I thought, well, wait a minute, that
Right.
doesn't seem like that's gonna be enough.
Right.
But
And I think you're right, the bigger question is, and that's something that council would have to discuss tonight if you wanted to make a change in that, is that, we're going to be looking at options and things to do on Aurora Park, or not just Aurora Park, but we've got other gravel roads as
Yeah,
well.
we got one.
What are we going to do? And certainly, I think 10,000 is pretty light if we're going to make some of the changes that were suggested. So, could that be 20,000? I'm sure that could easily be 20,000.
I think for me, I would need to have Ann here to talk about it, because if we're saying 10,000 is just how much the gravel costs, that can't be a bulk of the cost of doing it, right? Just the gravel itself is surely just a part. But I don't know how much the rest of it is, and I would need Ann to explain that process and the grading and blah 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 and so on and so forth. So I think Bonnie is correct to see 10,000 doesn't seem right, but what I think some of these other numbers she had to have included, right? Salaries, personal total 80,000. Well, some of that is included in that number Ann gave, but I don't know what percentage or what not.
And I'm sure it was an estimate.
Even on the streets there for the pavement, it's 50,000. Well, she said they spent, which I know didn't come out of street repairs. This stuff didn't. It came out of capital improvement.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to be,
Nothing in Aurora Park comes out of capital improvement. It comes out of street.
I think we need to be a little bit careful, because I don't know that any of us really know exactly what we're looking at here. And that's a small problem there, but there's also, if you look at a couple other items, like line 47 is 50,000 every year, but in 2019 we spent 38. I don't know if we're going to spend 50,000 in 2020 or not. I mean, I think that's just a plug number. It looks to me like it's a plug number, but I don't know. And then when you look at street improvements, that's doubled from 25 to 50,000. So there's other things in this budget, and I don't know all that detail myself, and I'm not sure that we do. Unfortunately, Ann's not here and I don't think she was asked to be here because we didn't think we were going to talk a lot about streets.
I'm in the same shoes. I want to understand it.
And a lot of it's more where accounting meets the reality, where
Right.
when we're coding an invoice on rock purchases or asphalt purchases, we want it to go to a line that actually reflects that purchase, and versus if we just said street and had expenses and just had all
expenses,
so
right.
a lot of it is, and I wasn't advised on the calculations, but I'm sure that's what Dan just kind of saw. And it might have been a report I did on just how much total amount, and that's why I included a lot of the reserve stuff, maybe some bonded stuff, is how much we've invested in streets throughout the last 8 years, you know, and they divide it by the amount of roads, and that's where you get a larger number that's probably not reflected.
Yeah, I think that we just need to understand that better, and I think we're slating to talk Aurora Park next workshop. Is that
Yes.
still the plan? Okay, so we're going to talk about it next time and get more detail, and we obviously don't make the decisions in these meetings, but we do get some consensus about where we're going and stuff. At least we hope to.
The amount, because of what we were told. It was
Right.
kind of a red flag to me.
Okay. Very good. Mr. Atterbury, did you have anything you wanted to bring up?
I was going to add just one, and it's really just, I was going to talk real quick. The chief and I kind of want some direction on a proposal you'll probably see in the next meeting or two.
These guys.
And Mayor, I also asked the chief to come, because I know during our budget discussions, there were some questions about staffing and things like that. And then, so that's why he's here to discuss that. And then Ted and him also want to talk about this body cams, I think, isn't it? So,
Real quick, and we don't have to make it a big, long thing. So body cameras are something that are pretty invaluable to officers throughout the nation. But they are rather pricey, and the ones we have right now are probably over their useful life, like most of our equipment. There's options to just buy the body cameras outright, one expense, and then we have to pay for all the upgrades, and if a battery goes down, which happens quite frequently, or you can get on some of this, like a 5-year, what you have right in front of you, a 5-year plan that will supply all officers with new cameras, but also upgrade them. They're under warranty, which we've had a lot of luck with our tasers. We entered this type of agreement, if a few council members remember, with our tasers, we've had a lot of luck with, because those go down because they're worn all the time. And really, we haven't had this discussion really, and before we present something to the front of the council, I thought it'd be a good time to talk if you guys had any objections to maybe entering this type of agreement where it's 0% interest for 5 years. You stretch the payments out a little bit, and you get new equipment without the worry of a bigger expense. Keep buying new ones off and on throughout the years. I try to get. This comes with like all the licensing and everything else that you would need to operate the equipment. And Chief's here to talk a little bit as well. If you have any questions for him, I'm more of the finance side of how we want to finance $30,000 in equipment. Either pay for it outright or do one of these continuing agreements with a company.
Is this a lease type of thing like we do with some of the copy machines?
Chief, I think, I believe we don't lease the equipment. This is a purchased equipment program.
This is when we purchase the equipment, every 2.5 years, they upgrade it to the newest model. So we don't fall behind. And that's why it's, we think, a good idea, because it keeps us current, and we don't have to worry about coming back to you to ask for the new equipment every year. So it's purchased, and we own the last set. If we don't re-up on something, we'll own that last set.
My question on this would be, we've got a proposal from one company. Is there anybody else that offers these services? And can we, I'd want to see something from a competitor if there is one.
There are competitors, but they're not this good. And we're already set up to handle this company's. We're with them now. Okay, this is the equipment we have now. We're just wanting to enter into this. They save on evidence.com, the first line at the top. That's where we, all of the videos that we've had since 2014, that's where they reside. And we have absolutely no interest in changing vendors, because then we'll lose the support for the video that's already out there. because I doubt that, well, this is a proprietary system, and we would have to try to,
We'd have to
we
migrate.
would have to maintain something with evidence.com because they're really reluctant to give other people their access to their coding and so on.
Well, that might be something that would be interesting to have our city attorney look at, is to make sure that we do have an out with anybody that we enter into a contract with that's going to have our data, our intellectual property, things that we need to have access to. That's just from a technology perspective, that's really important to understand. How do you exit a technology vendor as part of any sort of kind of long-term agreement?
I would agree. I mean, if we are in a situation where we're locked into a company, no matter what, they get to pick the number every year.
That's right.
Because we can't get out of it. So I would be interested in knowing that too. And I also resonate with Councilman Smith. You know, we kind of make Ann do. I don't make her, whatever. We kind of make her. We make her, give multiple different things, even though she might know 100% which one we're going to go with before she does it, but she does it every time. I think that's just a good policy, and I know there are going to be times that is going to be it's a waste of Ann's time in her mind, probably, and then it may be a waste of your time in this situation. I don't know, but those two questions both I agree with as well.
Can we take it up in 5 years?
I think you'll just tell that council to take it up in 5 years.
I will tell you that the numbers that you have here were higher, and Lieutenant Fox did a good job of working with Mr. Schmidt on whittling down and taking some of the profits that they were going to have, so that we get to keep them here. And, what can you give us? Well, some of that was some warranty savings and some storage savings. So we try to work with the vendors, like our Taser vendor. We got a lot of benefit from that negotiation. And so he's worked hard at getting this negotiation that's the best for the city. And again, I say, there are some other vendors out there, and there are some new ones on the market. And in time, they may prove to be very, very good. But I'm reluctant to go with somebody new on the market just because they've come up with a product to compete against these folks.
I think if you get the bid from those other companies and they're 10% lower, and you say why you don't want to go to those other companies, you'd like the company that's a 10% more, I probably will be totally receptive to that argument. But I still am for kind of the principle of other bids rather than just a single bid.
As far as the structure goes, would you rather just pay for equipment and let it run out, or are you okay with a continuing service agreement type purchase? I don't even know what they call it nowadays.
So
It's not
you're
a
saying
lease, but
0%.
it's like a lease to own, pretty much.
It's zero interest, it doesn't cost much. I mean, I would be.
Yeah,
I can't
it's
see
kinda-
why I wouldn't be for it unless someone else has a
To
reason
me, I
why
like
it
free
would be.
money, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that model of having a, continuous service as long as you're not paying a premium for it, and that's something that you can help us run the numbers on.
This is the same thing that we do with DigiTicket, our ticketing software. We have it as a service. This is not unlike that. And when we have equipment go down, we call them. They send us the new equipment. We send them the bad equipment back, and it keeps us up and running better. So that's one of the benefits here.
So these kind of deals, I like these kind of deals because of that very issue. And my experience especially was with the copy machines, and years ago, copy machine technology was horrible. You never knew when a machine was going to go down and how long it was going to last. And so I started a program of leasing those machines, most businesses that I was with, and only did that. It was lease purchase is what they were, but the advantage of them was the company that's selling it to you was servicing that equipment. They made sure it was always up and running, and if there was a problem, they were out there fixing it, okay? And without that, you were calling the service guy up and hoping he'd come out whenever you got around to it. but with that kind of agreement, he took care of it. And that makes a world of difference for staffing. And I see that same kind of thing with police officers. Having this kind of a deal makes a world of difference. It keeps their uptime a lot better. Now, does anybody else offer this kind of a package? I don't know.
Well,
With-
I will tell you, it's not as though we have not looked at anything else, because we get journals just like everybody else does, and we look at our monthly periodicals, and we read about other equipment, whether it be from WatchGuard or VO, some of the other companies. Some of them are cheap, okay, and they're cheap for a reason. And for instance, the WatchGuard, we've been in talks with the WatchGuard company, because that's what our car cameras are, is the WatchGuard brand. Very good. But their cost for their cameras is about double this. So that's an easy decision for us to make. We've got this, we like it, we're accustomed to it, we use it every single day. The officers use the Axon cameras, the body cameras, and to switch for this, I don't want to say for the sake of switching or for a few dollars, is not worth it. There's a lot to be said for muscle memory and being able to use the equipment under stress the way it's used today, instead of having to relearn equipment. And I know that it just takes time, but it is a consideration of ours. But we do look at other equipment all the time. Whenever the product news bulletins come out, I pore over those and see if there's anything of interest, and a lot of it is just really shiny.
Glossy paper.
But we have to guard against getting the shinies and go with that tried and true, the thing that is consistently good, and that's what this product is for us.
Well, yeah, if we got a quote from WatchGuard and we know that they're twice as expensive from their quote, then that makes me feel a lot better, right? My interest isn't in trying to, I have no business determining what the right equipment for you guys is. I want to understand that we've done our homework, we've looked at our alternatives, and we know that we're getting the right equipment at the most cost-effective price, and that's really all my interest is in making sure that we've looked at those alternatives.
And those are all things that we need to do for transparency. We need to let all of our citizens know we're getting the best bang for the buck. And if we only come in with one option, everybody's going to say, who else was out there? What else was better? Maybe nothing, but we don't have anything to compare it to.
Sure. And I'm sure that gives us great direction to go to the report model. I threw this in here to make sure we're okay with the finance structure, because we haven't had this discussion. I didn't want to have a big, long discussion at a council meeting. I think that's what workshops are for. So I think we have the appropriate direction, and you'll be able to discuss the merits of
we'll go back
each price when we're at the bench during the council meeting. So I understand exactly what you guys want.
Okay. And like Councilman Smith said, we do need to have an exit strategy. Something could happen to the company. We need to be able to move our files if something happens to them. It may be somebody in 3 or 4 years comes along and has a much better product we'd like to be able to move to. So I don't know how we can structure that in our contract with them, but if they're using some proprietary protocol, we need to put an end to that.
Well, and to that I would say, if you drive a Ford, if you drive a Chevy, they've got proprietary software in those vehicles too. It's just part of doing business in a police
Yeah, but
department or in
I
a city.
I can buy another car any day and it'll serve the same function.
But it may
I'm not
have-
going to move over my tires and wheels and all that stuff. It is different.
And from a data storage perspective, data storage should be data storage, and they should be using common standards with common file types, and you ought to be able to move from one storage provider to the other. And if that's not something that we've contractually negotiated with them, that will be something I'll be looking for in our new contract.
Well, and I'd look for some kind of information on their backup. I mean, all these companies are getting hacked and their data's being encrypted and being asked for money to decrypt it and all that. We need to
I
have
could
some good
see if
backup
an
information.
Axon rep could come in and give you a presentation.
Yeah, I think we've got good direction on this, and we'll talk about these details later. And I don't think my
we don't
understanding
need to
is you
decide
guys
it
weren't even
tonight.
prepared, weren't necessarily planning on doing
This is just something we,
Yeah.
No, so I think we're fine with this finance structure, and if that's the question we needed to ask, we're good. And we can
I was
probably
going to say
go on.
that too. If the only question is a finance model, I'm fine with that.
and I'll get a bid for like WatchGuard, so that we can have an idea of what a 5-year plan, if they even have one, similar to this, would look like. Yeah. And we should probably have that soon.
What I heard from all of this, we'd just like a little bit more communication from you. Now, I know you're used to coming in and saying, this is it, this is what we're doing, okay? Not in that tone or anything like that. But when you look at someone else, or when you're presenting and you have looked at someone else, just let us know.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Ann sent something out the other day, and I had to turn the paper around 2 or 3 times to figure out which way was up on it, because, you know, it's like, okay, I'm not going to be a very good judge of this. I've got to rely on that. What the verbal part will be on that. And you're usually a very good communicator, so I'm surprised that even came up.
And we obviously, hopefully, sure you know, none of us are slightly concerned you're making a bad choice. We have total confidence in you. You're doing a great job. You know, I mean, there's like a we're probably going to approve this later on. You know, so no, I
agree
almost
with
think
that.
sounded too hard on you. I
agree
I
with
think
that
you're doing
too.
a great job, and you know, keep going doing what you're doing. And this sounds like it's going to work out great. For
I
us.
will be able to tell you that when you do approve it, I'm sure you will, it'll be less, because some of those 4 numbers on the front are just for the end of this year. So
If we were a private
those will be
enterprise,
2s or something.
if we were a private enterprise, we would give you the right to screw it up and fire you later. But we're a public entity, so we have to be transparent when we go in. Everybody has to know what's going on.
Good point.
Yeah, and I was looking at the very top right. This one expires on 8/31, so we'll try to have something for you long before then.
Ted, how do you see this affecting the budget? Is there any change that we would need to make as a result of this type of agreement that we should anticipate?
No, these types of purchases I do out of equipment replacement reserve.
It won't be part of the contractual
It's not a
services.
contractual basis or anything like that.
Okay.
I printed those off too, but I don't want to prolong the discussion further. But a lot of these major equipment that we know we're going to have to purchase, I put in our schedule so that we can replenish it when needed, when the life cycle is out. So just like the tasers and the laptops and that kind of thing.
Okay, well, let's move on to the personnel. So what you have on that this sheet here is a list of all of our personnel and the shift that they work, a rundown of the different positions that we have, our court police clerk, and the how they're dispersed throughout the organization as far as positions, and that it's minimal, really. I want to come to you sometime in the probably not too distant future and suggest a couple of more positions. I say that even though you see on here that there are open positions.
Looks like 4.
And I want 3 actually. Yeah. Well, total of 4. We just hired Devin Haynes. So we've got an open position on third, 2 on second, and then we've been using one as a detective position. Okay. So this big. Okay, I'll back up a little bit. So some of the things that we have, the trials and tribulations of hiring good qualified people. There's a sparse applicant pool right now, and when I first got here 6 years ago. We struggled because we had so many applicants, it was hard to get through them all. We had like 230 the first advertisement we put out. We've had, last month, I think we had 4 people apply. And we're trying to use the new website, the new Kansas Jobs kansasgovjobs.com, and we're still working through some of the struggles with that. But even after we find somebody, we've got to look into their background, and that's why I gave you this one right here. You don't have to look at it now, but please take some time and look through it and look at how in depth the background check is. And I can guarantee you, we do one of the more thorough background checks of departments, especially our size in the state. We look at everything. We look at the decertifications at Kansas Seapost. We look at the national decertification database, and that's one of the things I'm going to add in here. You know, have you been decertified in another state? That's not a question we ask, but it's something that's been in the news. So we want to make sure that we get the best candidates that we can. And we passed on some because of problems in other places, in other departments. And some of the things, the way they answer the questions on here, you can just tell from one page to the next that they're being evasive. So then we try to find out, and then the fact that they're evasive means that we're not going to hire them. We want somebody to be forthright and honest about the mistakes they've made in the past. And we've hired some people who've made mistakes in the past. Okay, they're not game killers. It's just that they made a mistake, they grew from it, and they moved on, and it wasn't so bad that we couldn't hire them. So if you get a chance, go ahead and look through that. Like I said, each candidate or each applicant gets to go through that. Something I didn't do is, if you could pass those around, please.
So how many people just look at this form and turn around and leave?
There's probably a few. We've given them this form before and never seen them again. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
If you're afraid to answer these questions,
Saves you both
we don't
time.
need you here. What I've just given you is a notice of disqualification. So these are many of the things that people are disqualified for employment here on the Wichita PD, or Bel Aire PD. This is fashioned in large part from Wichita PD with a couple of additions here and there. But these are some of the things that we disqualify applicants for. There's a national movement right now. The environment is making it very difficult to get people to want to be police officers. I know that in Minneapolis and some of the other large cities who've had large-scale unrest, they're losing officers in large numbers, large percentages. And, I don't mean to be that way about it, but I hope some of those good people come this direction. Kansas is ahead of the game as far as law enforcement in the United States. We're one of the few departments in the nation, only 5. No, we're the only one who can decertify somebody for their course of conduct. Not a misdemeanor conviction, not a felony conviction. No, just a course of conduct. Did you do this thing that might be on this list that I just gave you? Did you do that? Okay? We don't have to go to court. It's not a civil issue. Can we just understand that you did that? You're gone. You're decertified. So the state of Kansas is ahead of the game. Well, another area where we're ahead of the game is our state training academy. So when we hire an applicant that is not already certified, they have to go to the state training academy. That's only 14 weeks, but it's an action-packed 14 weeks. They've got 1,100 training objectives that they have to learn before they get to graduate. When they graduate, we bring them back here. They don't just hit the street. We put them through field training. They have to be with an officer, a senior officer, for depending on whether they're commissioned or not commissioned. So if they've gone to the academy, it's 12 weeks. It's shorter if they've already been commissioned. And they get to learn how to do things in real life with real people and not training scenarios, because some of them have not experienced some of the things that we experience out here. And the ability to do that or why we do that is that it's a way for them to learn on the job and have somebody there to help guide them through and pull them back, guide them in the right way, and teach them not only the right way to follow the law, constitutional policing, how to treat people right, but also how to learn our departmental philosophy, and all of those things included. So it's difficult to find the applicants out there. We're having a problem. We've had a problem from day one on diversity. Okay, we don't have a very diverse police department. We've got 2 females, and the rest a bunch of white guys. Okay, and we have struggled. We've approached UPS drivers and nurses at the hospital, to ask them to apply, and those that have, we're not able to pass this, because you can be a nurse, you can be a UPS driver, you can be a lot of professions and still have some of this baggage, but you can't be a police officer. Okay. So, we're using part-time officers. We've got 3. We're in talks with one right now. He's been laid off from the aviation industry, flight safety. He's a pilot, and he's a trainer, and he's worked here for 16 years? Yeah. So I approached him a week or so ago to see if because he had been laid off, to see if he could think about coming on full-time until the aviation industry recovered such that he could go back into what he loves to do, and that's flight safety and train people how to fly. Not really a long-term benefit for us, but a short-term benefit for us, so we can fill another one of these positions. We're trying very hard. We're reaching out. We're talking to other departments. I talk to chiefs across the state. Say they have somebody who's applied for them. They can't hire them at that point. Well, send them our way. We haven't had a lot of luck with that, but we've made the request. One of the things that's big right now is specialized training for mental health and behavioral issues. Almost all of our officers are CIT, critical incident trained, so that when we run into that difficult situation with that highly emotional or mental person going through a mental episode, they can deal with that. And that's one of the things we're looking for that's not written down in the applicants that come through the door. One of the things that I want you to consider is the city of Bel Aire is growing. A lot more residential units. We've got the apartments. I don't know if there are plans for anything more. I think my people will come and talk from this place. We've had a little problem with the management company and trying to manage some of the people who live there. So we have a lot of group homes that require that mental health and behavioral training to work with the clientele that they have living in those group homes. So those are things that we look at. If we have an applicant come in, are they going to be able to do what we need them to do with the special populations that we have? So the other thing that Ted and I have talked about, Ty and I have talked about, is pay. That's been an issue. I know that there's a pay study in progress. We lag behind other departments in the area, and that hurts us. We lost an officer recently to another agency because they were able to pay him a few dollars more. And a dollar is $2,080 a year. So if you can make $3 more, that's a hefty sum. And so I hate to think that somebody would leave for just money, but it happens. So one of the things that I'd like to put out for your consideration is specialty and incentive pays. It's not that uncommon. As a matter of fact, it's very common throughout the United States, and I just want to go through some of them so you know where my mind is, so that maybe we can consider those things. And that is bilingual pay, field officer or field training officer pay, the educational pay, associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, We've got some people that are degreed on our department, and that's something that we can do, and as a monthly stipend to in addition to their base pay. Don't get upset with me.
Mask back
Just stuff it in your mouth.
One of the things that that is because of their pay issue, a lot of them can't afford to go back to school. So I thought tuition reimbursement was something I'd throw out to you. Longevity pay. We've got an 11-year. Toomey 16. Steele is 19. Yeah. And he's at the top of his pay range, or really, really close. So longevity pay is something. Cell phone allowance, extending that to, because when officers are out on the street, they're calling for wreckers, and they're doing it most of the time on their private phone. And I know we already have a cell phone allowance, but maybe to formalize it for the troops, something that might be more available to them. And then some specialty pays, like special assignment pays, like SRO, the school resource officer, being up in the schools all the time, dealing with, because they don't deal with just a neighborhood issue, a barking dog, a fight or something. They deal with the things in the school, which are the fights, the social work, the resource development, and exercising those resources for the kids who are having problems, who might be victims of crime. They have a lot of specialized training to deal with those issues that are inside the school environment. Firearms instructor, a range master, and we don't have one right now, but I'd love to have one as a collision reconstructionist. And we do have one on staff right now, a certified voice stress analyst. That is right there with polygraph, probably better than a polygraph. And physical performance pay. This is something that a lot of departments do, and it's an effort to keep people in shape. Every year, you go through the physical day, and you make it through all the steps, and you get your physical performance pay. Some amount that the city decides that would be appropriate as a reward for being in good shape.
Hey, Chief. One thing I did do was kind of a small straw poll, and I noticed when I was looking at other departments in the area, they had steps up for police officer, and I think that's what you're getting at. I'm a little more torn to, you have an entry level or a patrol officer, a master police officer. Is that something that you would be?
I am not opposed to that.
Yeah, because I did notice the one officer we did lose due to pay. They put a new title. I think it was lieutenant. How much does, in your estimation, we have these conversations, the titles, and we moved one of our officers to a sergeant last year or year before.
Mm-hmm.
Did that improve morale, that kind of thing? On that.
I think it did, and that's because second and third watch, we had them out there without a supervisor. For second watch, most of their shift. For third watch, all of their shift. And that makes me really uncomfortable. It made Jackie really uncomfortable, and Ty. Supervision is needed. And so what we did is we created the sergeant position. We promoted Sean Davis, and he works a split second, third. So he's there for the major part of the shift so that he can cover those questions, the things that come up. Everybody has his phone number, my phone number, Lieutenant Fox's phone number, so that if they run into anything, they have us on the horn. And they ask questions as far as what steps do they take next, because some things get kind of complicated with search and seizure law and juveniles and children in need of care cases, that type of thing. So that is something else that we've talked about. You can have you have a police officer 1, 2, 3. Some places call them corporals, privates, corporals. The more military structure. That's very common. When you do that, you put a stripe on, a single stripe, maybe a double stripe, and then they get promoted to sergeant. But being a small department, we don't have a lot of space to do those things. A Wichita PD, a Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, they have those positions that become available more often. We don't. So what other ways can we incentivize morale? And some of those things are what I just discussed.
So, hearing what you're saying here, I think that, and I don't want to speak for anybody else here that has a different idea, but I think it probably would be wisest if we asked you to make proposals in these areas, because I certainly don't know what the right incentives would be. And unfortunately, we're so far into the budget discussion now, I don't know that we could do anything for 2021, but maybe we could certainly consider something for 2022 and be in that discussion, that mindset. I thought we were also, and Ted, tell me if I have this memory wrong, but we also are doing some salary studies, is that correct, or some pay studies?
Yeah, I'm currently in the middle of one right now.
Okay.
And to remind, I think we did leave a little bit over 30% reserves for maybe a way to address it in 2021 when
Okay.
the study comes up. It hasn't been decided, but there might be some room to move if there is a need that the salary study addresses.
Yeah. Well, I certainly want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to retain our good officers. We don't want to be losing them. And I think I've told this story before. There's two sides of that coin. Okay, I worked at Britton Machine when Dewey Britton owned the company, and I was there when he sold the company. And unfortunately, he sold the company to a company who didn't have the capital to actually operate the company properly. And so they were so burdened with debt, they leveraged it so badly that they couldn't pay the benefits and the salaries that Dewey Britton was paying us.
And
The
I'm
morale
certainly
just
not,
went just down the dumper.
I'm certainly not saying we take on and shoulder a big part of this list at all.
Yeah.
These are just things that are common throughout the United States that
Sure.
you might consider as an incentive, one, to keep people, but also get people through the door that like the idea of any one of those things, because it would be good for them.
All I'm getting at is I think we definitely want to strike that balance but be on the high end of that balance, but strike that balance to make sure we don't go overboard with it, but do what's really good for our officers. Because, I was telling my wife last night, she was talking about some of these other cities and having such problems with some of their issues of rioting and the thing. And I said, the June 3rd incident here was telling of the difference the way you approach policing. If you hadn't done, you and Sheriff Easter hadn't done what you did and beefed up the support here, we could very well have had a problem here in the city. But I think the show of force just kept us from having any problem at all. It's too late when the riot starts to try to bring in the force. Now you've got to bring in National Guard sometimes to bring that under control. Unfortunately, that happens, and I've seen it happen several times in my lifetime. I think several others here have seen it in the news as well. I lived in L.A. during the 1965 racial riots, and they were just a couple miles from my house. I know how serious this stuff gets. It's pretty scary, okay? But anyway, I want to make sure we do what's the right thing to do.
We used to have I've been trying to remember what it was called at the time, but it was a community policing project.
Right, and that's on Lieutenant Fox's desk right now. He's put the finishing touches on it, and we would probably be doing one right now, if not for COVID.
Okay?
Yeah. So,
Well, and you guys can laugh at this, okay? But the way I found out about this program was I was working for a friend of mine who owned a nightclub. and I was the bouncer there. And so I came home, it'd be 3 a.m. in the morning. And so it's all dark, nobody's out, not in Bel Aire, you know. And I just push the button, go on in and what have you. That was about 3 weeks, and there was a police car waiting at 45th for me and followed me home. Well, of course, I'm tired, and I'm thinking, you
Grumpy?
a little bit, maybe. And then it was like, let it go. You got family to take care of and all of this other. He was there the next week, too. In fact, he was there the next night. And that's when I found out that somehow, whoever was police chief then, because it wasn't you, I don't believe, had learned that I was coming home at 3 a.m. on these weekend nights and made sure that I got in the garage and that the light came on in the house. Now, that's a service you don't get very often.
Ms. Stinson, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just sitting here listening.
Oh, I was watching her from all the way over here.
Yeah, I got a direct line to. I was just wondering, have you ever had talk of motorcycles for Bel Air, or has that ever been a thought?
No, they're expensive and the liability is high.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we are really, really happy with the enclosed boxes that we drive around.
They're a lot safer.
In the winter.
So, well, that too, but and even with that, we've had an accident where a couple of officers were seriously injured. So we're not going to look at motorcycles anytime soon.
And then I also wanted to know, I've talked to some people that are in law enforcement, and they say that these smaller cities kind of carry a lot more duties than what you would maybe in a bigger city. Like, you would have a detective, you would have this, you would have that, and the officer would do the officer job. Instead, here, you guys kind of wear all the hats, is that correct?
You're correct. The officers, when they make calls, for instance, one's out on an animal bite right now. They don't have animal control. They are animal control. So they're going to go and look and see if the person who's offending dog bit the other dog, see if their dog is up on their shots. They're going to evaluate the situation. They're going to take the photos. They're going to work that case. If a citation or a summons needs to be written, they're going to write it. In cases where we have major crimes, and we have a few, those officers work that case. They then get a presentation packet together for the district attorney. They send it to them. Today it's electronically. And then they present to the DA on that case to see if they'll prefer charges for the case that we have, or see if there's some more additional investigation that needs to be done before that case is charged. Traffic accidents, we work our own. In large metropolitan areas, they have traffic investigators. And so the officer gets there, they stop the traffic and let that person do their job. We do that here. So we wear many, many hats. Thank you for that. And that's something that I mean, there are things that our officers do. You pull somebody from Wichita, they won't know how to do it. But our folks do, because they have to wear all those hats. Thank you.
So the pay should kind of be a compensation for that. I mean, that's where I'm.
I totally agree with you. I'm looking at Ted here going,
I just
Mayor.
know what I've been told, and I have it from pretty good sources that
yeah.
you can't compete with bigger cities because you do have more hats to wear. There's more responsibility. There's more work. There's,
And in the future, we're going to need more officers. The fact that we have unfilled positions now isn't for the lack of effort, because we're trying. It's just that pool is so scant right now. We're not able to pull them out to get them hired. And when we have somebody, when we have that applicant, And if you were interviewing them, you'd go, oh yeah, that one. When we get that applicant, we don't wait for 3 weeks to call them in to take the test. We don't spend any time fooling around. Okay, can you be here tomorrow? Okay, let's get this ball rolling. So, because we don't want to lose them. Because if we don't hire them, somebody else will.
Mr. Smith, you wanted to ask?
Yeah, so thank you, Chief, for coming and talking to us about this, because we clearly have a problem with the number of our open roles, right? The number of open positions we have is clearly a problem that we need to solve. And it sounds like you've got some really good ideas on ways that we can at least make some incremental progress with incentives and try to move the needle here. I guess my question is really for Ted. You were kind of alluding to, because ultimately this all ties back to the budget discussion, right? And so if we've got a problem that we need to make progress on solving, and the solutions for that problem is going to require some funding, how do we make sure that we have appropriately allocated at least some funds to make sure that we're going to make progress towards solving that? And so you're kind of alluding to somewhere where we've done that. Could you call our attention specifically to that?
And Ted, before you do that, I'm not saying that we hire additional officers tomorrow if they walk through the door. I'm saying that in 2021, we really need to get serious. In 2022, I would love to have a plan in place to look at that, and certainly in 2023.
Well, and to be clear, what I'm talking about is just, the positions that we have on the books that aren't filled.
Yeah.
That's what I see as the biggest problem. And I recognize that someday in the future, maybe the way distant future, we may need to add some additional headcount. But at least making progress on filling the boxes that we've already approved and we're expecting to have on staff is what's at the forefront of my mind. And so I want to make sure that I understand where we've allocated a little bit of extra funding to either increase salaries because of the salary study, or look at some of these suggestions that you brought to us tonight on other incentives that we should be thinking about for the department.
So I can start you on the police budget, which is page 9 of the budget document. So what that is 13 positions plus some part-time and as you know, I have three officers. At the time of this budget, I had 3 officers open. So what I do is...
And Mr. Smith asked the question, the detective is a 4th watch position.
Yeah.
I put an extra open in there. I'm sorry.
So which one is it actually?
The detective.
The open detective on?
Yeah.
Okay.
That was one of the officers who was injured even though he was in his protective box at 53rd and Rock Road and got hit by somebody. So
So that one's not open?
that one is not open. That's actually an officer position we were using as a detective. I got so comfortable with it and I just thought, okay, detective, and I put it down.
So to put you in my budget perspective, I have a huge master file spreadsheet that has personnel in it. Around the time we were developing the budget, we only had 2 officers open. So when I look at 2021, I give everybody, all the current officers a step. I increase benefits to the appropriate level. It spits out a number. What I do with the open positions, we just hired Devin Haynes, and we had to do some negotiation now. Chief and I sit down, and Ty sit down a lot and say, hey, we need to offer this guy a job now. Let's find an appropriate level that we can budget for. It's not like every officer starts at step 1. We're not that dumb, to make it sense. We want to recruit the best we can.
Yeah.
So what I do is I kind of take that as a median and say, all right, maybe the 2 officers we hire in 2021 are going to be around that price point. So I plug that number in and then add what a normal family of benefits would cost. And that's reflected in the 2021 proposed column.
Just in the salaries.
It's just
line.
in the salaries, the overtime, the FICA, capers, health and dental, workman's comp. So that whole salary line is included in what I project as fully police department. Now, when you talk about increasing salaries, that's only one piece of the puzzle. That's salary and FICA. It doesn't hit benefits, which surprisingly benefits, which helps when you're doing a salary study. It doesn't cost as much as you think, unless you wanted to give full benefits at no cost to the employer. That'd be rough. What I was alluding to was, what can be found on page 17. We're ending, and this is with sales tax taking a dive, or a small dive in 2021. We're ending our budget, our general fund budget, with 36% reserves. Our policy says 30. So when we talk about will we have any money if the salary study dictates it, it's really we're going to move money from the bottom line to the salary line.
Not
to
already
fund.
built in on page 9.
The real struggle I have and what we're going to spend a couple of nights on right here is making sure we don't pigeonhole the city in an operating cost standpoint. If we give everybody we might be able to do it for 1 or 2 years, but we'll have to stretch it out to make sure we can maintain this level of personnel expense. But that's a whole nother bag of worms. However, like Chief said, $1 an hour is $2,800 a year. That I know that is a lot to the individual person, but to the organization, it's not going to topple our operating costs. So what I say to everything is, if we keep growing, we'll be doing well. But the growth numbers is what I really look at as far as that goes. And John, Councilmember Welch and I have been in discussions, and I'm hoping the accelerated land debt payment's going to come off in 2 years. 2 years. We might be able to look at maybe smoothing that out even further in the next year. So that might be part of this discussion, is how do we lower some debt costs in order to fund the salary study. So those are all big discussions we can have over a couple of workshops. But that's when I say I think we will have the ability to address those needs. It's always a give and take. The biggest give will be, if we're hired, which we're gonna have to start looking at as we continue to grow to the 15,000 population city. We can't maintain. All right, flat salary, flat staff, because it is going to be, or like we're doing with online payments, ways to innovate, cut down on adding more staff. But there's no RoboCops out there yet.
There are actually.
And we've done some of those things. We went to electronic ticketing, and we took away a lot of work for the clerk, okay, so she could focus on the other things that she was doing. So we're constantly looking at those things that will help, the technology that helps us do the job smarter, better, more efficiently, so that we can allocate our decision making in a different way, and maybe see some real success with the decisions that we make.
Chief, I've got a question. I've been sitting here kind of like Smith for a while. You talked about a salary increase for education level. How does education level make a better police officer?
There's a guy by the name of O.W. Wilson, and he at one point was a Wichita police chief. Then he went on to be the police commissioner in Chicago, I believe it was. And he did some research along with the FBI, and they determined way back in the 40s into the 50s that your more educated officer oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes makes more, I don't want to say rational, they make better decisions. And so when you have better decisions made by a police officer, that because things will go wrong, it's more defensible when you're in court. Now, I came into the profession and I had a high school diploma and 20 hours, 30 hours of college before K-State asked me to look somewhere else. Okay, and then, but
That's
now I have
part of my question. Does it just prove they're smart?
Yeah.
And do the street smarts for a 5-year
Oh.
patrol officer beat
It-
associate's degree?
It all comes into play. We want smart people. Okay, we want people with street smarts, and we want people with think smarts. And when you can get somebody like that, that's where we don't waste any time, and we get them through the door, and we try to get them through the process quickly. because that, you're hitting a trifecta. You've got a good personality that's going to be a good fit. They're educated, and they're willing to take the job here for a little less money than going to Wichita. So, because a lot of people don't want to work in the big city.
Yes,
And
that
I
is-
appreciate
that is a
those
plus
people.
for some people.
Yeah. So it does make a difference. I know that I used to know the numbers for the city of Wichita, how many officers have undergraduate degrees and how many have graduate degrees. I think it was, what sticks in my mind was 17% of the officers, this was back in 2009, had master's degrees on Wichita PD, and it was 40-some percent, I think, had undergraduate degrees.
Are these degrees in something related to law enforcement, or does it make any
Oftentimes.
difference?
It used to be required that it had to be in something in law enforcement to get the tuition reimbursement or the educational pay. And then somewhere along the line, the union negotiated that was not necessarily important.
Okay, well,
But
just
that was a
degree
contract
in basket
negotiation.
weaving doesn't mean much, is what I'm.
Yeah. Oh, there's some.
Theology are super important.
There's some. Well, Jeremy Vogel. You can see him. Well, I forget what channel he's on. KWCH maybe. Weatherman. Okay, he's been a Wichita police officer for a number of years. He came from being a weatherman to be a police officer. Now back, and I don't know if he's full time or part time, but he's a weatherman. It's meteorology. Was it good? What that degree made him good at is speaking to groups, being articulate, and being able to talk to people, just general populations. So was it useful for law enforcement? Yeah, in that respect. That he could tell us when the storms were coming.
People always get antsy when there's a storm coming.
Yeah.
Do most of our officers live in Bel Aire?
No. I think I'm the only one. Yeah. If you narrowed our applicant pool now is the United States, and I got 4 last month. If you narrow it to, I know where you're going. If you narrow it to the city of Bel Aire, I may get 4 every couple of years.
Well, along those
No.
lines,
Because that's been a discussion before.
Well, my thought process is not so much the starting, but the staying. It would seem to me that, they get more, I've been reading some things recently about police officers all over who are starting different, I don't want to call them projects, but, things that are more with the schools and this type of thing now, but extracurricular activities of the good kind.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a food drive,
And we participate in when asked, because some of the schools, they like you there when they request you, and not maybe any time other than that. But we try to participate. We go over and see the kids at Isley. Of course, Officer Christ is over at the high school and any other school that requests her here in Bel Aire, but she splits time over at Isley also, so the kids get to sit with her and ask her all sorts of questions and break down those barriers that are there. So, yeah.
Is there any requirement that they live within a certain distance?
Yeah, they've got to be able to be here in 45 minutes.
Okay, that's a long ways.
Yeah. But most, I think, for instance, we've got an officer who lives in South Wichita. Okay. Should that exclude him from employment here? No, he's a great guy. He gets here when he needs to be here and does a lot for our department. Very valuable as a person. The distance isn't really a concern because he's here when he's supposed to be here.
Well, Chief, I have a number of questions, but I think they would probably veer us wildly off course for what we're doing tonight. So just if I can summarize, seems like we have a problem with these open positions. We're not having enough applicants. that problem is not able to be solved just by you searching for applicants. You've laid out how you've been working very hard to search for applicants and you're having trouble with that. You're thinking part of the solution to that problem is something that the governing body needs to do something about. And if I'm reading that right, I would say for myself, I think I agree. It's not a high-paying job. We pay lower than other people. Some of the shine of being a police officer is not there because of current conditions, which is probably not helping your cause either. And so I would just say I am definitely sympathetic to proposals and ideas and things that might be governing body level things that we need to improve, salary, incentives, whatever proposal that be. I'm for hearing all those. But as far as more information I would need tonight that would contribute to that specific thing, I don't think I need any more information.
Pay study is probably the next important thing that you're going to look at to make a decision on. And I've provided Ted with some very recent hiring data from where was that? Indeed.com.
The Adberry pay study, is that what you're referring to?
The what?
The Adberry pay study, is that
That's the one. That's the one. And what I did is I went on Indeed.com and I picked every police officer opening in the state of Kansas and found the starting pay. And then I provided it. So it's nowhere near where we are. It's considerably higher than we are. And our starting pay, I don't know that we've ever actually started somebody at our starting pay, but when they go to the website, what do they see? This starting pay. Because it's 14.
Right, so
70.
and that's what we touched on at the previous is, when our scale is shifted to the left and everybody else is pulled to the right. That's what happens when you look at the ranges, not more or less.
So when do we expect the results of that salary study?
I got a meeting on Friday with them. They had some turnover themselves, so.
Wild and crazy
It's been a
COVID.
fun year for everybody.
10% unemployment, how you know, how many people you need?
I know
I
we've
know
talked
that.
about this several times, and every time, the entire council is behind doing something to get our officers better incentives, pay, or whatever, how to phrase that. We want to do something to make sure they're happy.
The pay is the big thing. The incentives are the icing. Okay, I say go for the cake. If we can at some point go for the icing, we go for the icing. Just to encourage them and entice them to stay with us as the economy changes, as the world changes. First, we need, yes, Mr. Smith, we need to get them through the door, and we're really trying. So, any other questions for me?
Any other discussion about the budget in general at all?
Just maybe one other thing, just unrelated to Chief's presentation, but I do appreciate your presentation. Just a conversation on sales tax, Ted. We've talked a lot about the sales tax and the COVID projections, and I know every time we talk, you've got new and better and more current information. And so just wondered, is there any updates you want to share with us there that are impactful to the budget?
Sure. I remain so we got numbers at the end of last month that were July collections compared to July collections in 2019 were 3% up. So total about 4% up from 2019. Now we're projected a lot less. We're projected to lose 30% month of that each month. So it's about 13% total, but we're 3% up. So we'd have to lose 16% in total revenue, sales tax revenues, to meet what we got budgeted out right now. So my official projection is we're going to end with some more unanticipated revenue at the end of 2020 that we could utilize in this form as well, or in any way the council would approve.
And when you forecasted 2021 sales tax revenues, we were very conservative.
We
with
were
that, right?
we were 10%, pretty much across the board. So again, we don't know if it's gonna be late onset or not. The only thing that scares me, and I've shared this with a few, is Wall Street Journal had an interesting article on banks, how they're hoarding cash right now. That scares me a little bit, but with it, as you know, so the banks are expecting defaults, which I don't know what that means for a city, but again, I wouldn't pull the plug and say we're going to go 3% up just yet, but I would be very confident saying we're not going to hit the level of recession that we might have planned back in June.
The positive thing to think about is if what we're hoping happens is that our sales tax aren't down, and then when you're looking at the 2022 budget, you can go to Ted and say, Ted, we want to spend another $800,000 on streets, and he can say, we can do that because the way we budgeted for 2021, our revenues were up more than we expected, so therefore our reserves are up, and if you'd like to spend another $800,000 on roads, you can do that. So even though you're being with this 2021 proposed budget, even though Ted's estimating lower revenues and they come in high, that puts you ahead of the game next year.
Ty put that number out there, by the way.
That's all I have.
It's just rumors I've heard.
From that number, I'm going to try to get the police officer.
Yeah, see what happens, guys. See what happens.
Already spending it. Already got it. Okay, are we pretty well settled on budget discussion for this evening? Okay, so next Tuesday, we have a public meeting on budget, is that correct? And then we finalize the budget next Tuesday as well? Okay, just want to make sure I understood what the schedule was. I think you got it here in this other package, but.
And I think the only changes we talked about were 2 changes on the mayor and council department budget, right?
Right.
Yep.
Couple of typos.
One typo and one take the council or chamber grant down to the bottom line. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think I'd like to ask for a 10-minute break, and then we get into the water discussion. Okay. So be back at 8:10. Okay, I hate to interrupt all the good conversation, but it is 8:10. So I'm going to bring the meeting back to order, and let's start talking about the water agreement and the bulk water sales proposal. And Mr. Lasher, if you would please go over what you have to say here about this, and we'll
Sure. Yes, thank you,
discuss.
Mayor. It was, I think 2 council meetings ago, we had a couple developers came and were concerned about their water rates. And there's a longer history, I think I added in my report to you all. But basically, at one point, when Elk Creek was the only development going outside of Central Park, the city was trying to encourage developers to come and help them with their developments. And of course, we hear and we know that water in Bel Aire and Park City and Andover is higher than it is in Wichita. It's just because we're a suburb and we buy from them. It's just that way. And of course, they do a lot of development in Wichita, so we get compared to our taxes and water and things like that. So anyway, at that point, the city adopted a bulk water agreement where for the entryways, which if you have drove along Elk Creek, you know that there's a huge section of that that's along Rock Road, and there's those big berms, and at one point that was all being mowed and irrigated, and then the other entryways off 45th and Woodlawn both. So basically what the city did was had an agreement that we could provide him up to a certain amount for what Wichita charges, plus I think it was 10%. And so we did that, and then of course that development went bankrupt, and then we started having more and more development, and so it kind of went by the wayside. And so these developers that came in, that's what they were talking about when they talk about a bulk water agreement. And what it deals with is specifically irrigation meters. So we will install meters for irrigation. We'll install meters for drinking water. And so the entryway there at Elk Creek, I think, has a couple bulk water where that's what they do is they just run sprinkler systems. And so that's what they were, these developers that were in, that's what they were talking about was the one that was here, Mr. Schellenberg was talking about the villas of Prestwick, which are just right over here. So as you drive in, you see them to the south side. They have to maintain some of the right-of-way there. They've done some improvements. They sprinkle that, and that was their concern. And the way our system is set up, it's kind of a the more you use, the more you have to pay, and it's kind of they call it a conservation schedule to encourage, not a lot of sprinkling and things like that, because the more you use, the more you pay. And so I asked Ted to look at our sprinkler, how many meters we have out there, what kind of impact or benefit would they see if we did something like this, and then also you have the rates that we charge, and you can see how much thousands gallons they use, what the price goes to, and things like that. So I'll let Ted kind of cover his spreadsheets in here, and we can talk about total figures and then get your thoughts on, the policy.
So I'm working off of this report here. The first thing, anytime we talk about this, you got to kind of understand a little bit of the operations side of billing and management of the water system. Is you have irrigation only meters, and that's all I want to talk about. All you guys should be concerned about when we do bulk water agreements is an irrigation meter only. Some developers will try to save some money and not have 2 meters and just have one good. That same meter measures what they do in the lawn and what they do in the house. So I can't separate that usage once you have that. So if a developer wants bulk water agreement but they don't have dedicated irrigation meter, I can't help them. And they would have to, and they can put one in by getting a permit, paying a tap fee, and setting it up, and that's what they want to avoid. So that's just start off. That's what we're talking about is irrigation only. When I hear a developer understands what all I immediately go to is what we passed maybe 2 years ago is a bulk water agreement. When I hear them say water's high, what they're really asking is take off the clause that says once you're 75% built out in that phase, you're no longer eligible for the water agreement for bulk water rate. So really, that's the question at hand to me, is will we remove that exemption of 75% and allow them to water common areas at a bulk water rate?
So what you're saying is when they're developing, they're 75%, up to 75% done, we provide this thing in order to incentivize them to grow, but after they've got 75% done, then that benefit to encourage them to develop this goes away.
Goes away. That's very correct. Yeah, and that's the way it's worked. We've done. I think I have 2 currently on that agreement right now, and Bill's at Prestwick they're in a little unique situation because when you think, okay, there's 40 lots in this phase, you got to build out to 75%, but over there's really only 7 lots, and they've already, or what is it, 5 lots, and they already got 4 going up, or 6 lots. So I can't. So they're pretty much tapped out as soon as they begin. But we also have in our current bulk water agreement where you can get up to 4 months to establish your lawn of the bulk water rate, and that's what we did for the village of Prestwick, and I showed that as the village example. So what that essentially does, and the savings, like you can see, because I wanted to do a real life example, you can see they saved quite a bit from what they were paying. And that's what I did on the attachment, is kind of show you why it goes so high so fast, is because we're in this conservation plan, and he's getting dinged $5.94 every 1,000 gallons that they water. So yes, it is high. On the flip side, I'm doing it right now. I do an annual report that gets reported to the bond to the bond companies, and they ask you to list your top 10 users. And we have a lot of HOAs, not many big businesses, so a lot of our users are irrigation meters inside our top 10. So that's what I did, removing the 75% eligibility. And the bottom of my memo would be the rough estimate on projected revenue loss if we were to say, hey, let's remove that 75%. And what I saw is right now we collected from a year from, and it kind of works out all right, because from July 1, 2019, which July was a very, very wet year in standards, so there's not a lot of irrigation, to this year where it's a very dry year, so they're irrigating a lot. So we kind of captured both a wet and a dry year in the same study. We collected a little under $240,000 from those meters. What I did is basically reverse engineered it so that I could calculate how much we would, and I said, all right, if everybody paid $5.94 per 1,000 gallons, we collected $240,000. What happens if they use the same water at $4.33? We would collect $64,000 less money, which is about 3% of our total revenues for water sales per year. That would put a big strain on our utility. We just had a professional rate study asking us to raise rates. That's why it's hard for me to come in and say, yeah, we should do this, because we're trying to toe the line and keep the rates as low as possible and still improve some lines. So it is a problem. We understand the problem, and this hopefully gives you some information. You guys are welcome to do whatever you feel is necessary, and we'll follow it. But my recommendation would be to give you the information and let you make a decision, but it'd be
recommendation in there?
It would be very difficult to keep rates down for everybody if we do a lot of this.
So Ted, just to make sure I understand this correctly, you're saying that the villas at Prestwick already have the bulk water agreement in place?
Yes, for through August, and then they'd be off bulk water.
August of this year?
Yeah, so they get 4 months of sod to establish the sod.
Okay, but how about the right-of-way area that they're irrigating? What happens with that?
They would just become a water customer after the 4 months because they don't need the 70. They're over the 75%.
They're over the 75% ready. So they're asking for relief, even though they've been getting the discount right now, but they're already asking for relief for the future, is what you're
Yeah, so
saying. Okay.
they're a little unique in that they didn't know about the program, and I was working with them through the program, but they got, if you look on my report, the 715 bill really scared them with about $1,700 bill for that 1 meter, which makes sense. So now that they're paying $1,100 for that, so they got pretty much a credit of $600 for the being on that water program now. So I don't know if it's a mute point. I imagine it's not, but I think the city's working with them within the agreements passed by the council.
So what about the other developers? Because there were 3 developers here that same night. I don't know if that's a plan or a coincidence, but doesn't really matter. It's what it is. But are they on any of these on this bulk rate water agreement? Any of their developments?
So I know Iron Gate is, and I don't think they were.
They were not here.
Gene
was
Gene's
here.
been working with us for a few years. He's a very successful developer, and he reaches the 75% really fast. So that's been, and trying to help him the best we can. And it might be a good idea for us to sit down again and get him on the right track. And he's, it's hard with those duplexes because we've been working really hard, my staff, because what they'll do is they'll add just the regular sod irrigation to one of the side of the duplexes. Someone moves in, and then we have to work it out between Gene and the city.
Because it's on 1 meter.
A lot of the stuff we just really want irrigation meter to do like a whole block or 2 blocks, and then we could help out. But when you mix it all in with renters, and it becomes very confusing very fast. So so we can work with Gene some more, but within the confines of what's passed. And then who else has got on? I imagine there'll be others, but those are the ones off the top of my head.
So I'm not saying we can or need to do something here, but I just want to make sure we understand that these are the developers who are helping us be very successful. Well, the guy that fills at Prestwick, this is our only development in Bel Aire. They're very successful on the west side of town, extremely successful, and it would be very good to have them expand on this side in Bel Aire as well. So I want to help them what makes sense, but I don't want to get to the point that we're being unfair to other developments either. I mean, this is an issue we've had with HOAs as well. We had that discussion with some HOAs about, well, why are you doing it like that? Well, that's what we do with all the HOAs. It's the same. So it's fair is fair. Okay, so I don't want to get to an issue where we're favoring them, but I want to also be very helpful and supportive of them continuing their developments. So.
Yeah, I think this is a really tough issue because in some extent if we provide further discount to the developers, that effectively raises the rates for the residential customers that are here, and there's a fine balance that we have to achieve on incentivizing new development while also, taking care of the people that are here. Irrigation costs across the board in our city are high, and that's a common thing that I hear from people who live here. I see it on my water bill when I irrigate. It is really expensive, and so we also have to be careful not to take the incentive factor out of that, because there may be some solutions to where, long term, somebody's going to be paying for the irrigation in the common areas and the right of ways. Once the developers sold all the lots, those HOAs, those people that live there somebody's going to have to continue to pay for the water when the incentives someday fall off. And so there's also an element of how do you design things sometimes to not use that amount of water so that it's more sustainable.
I think water rates in Bel Aire everybody complains about them constantly, all the time, and I completely understand why this particular group is coming and complaining about it, because they are high and they're stinky, and the rest of us all complain about them on our water bill too. And like Councilman Smith said, if we give the break to them, first of all, you have to have consistency, as the mayor mentioned. That could be a whole can of worms. But then if you get to break them, you got to make it up. I don't think within the water, it's not like you suddenly we'll give them a break and suddenly we'll cut expenses. I don't think we can cut expenses. So expenses are going to be pretty much what they are, and we're already trying really hard not to raise the rates. And, like Ted said, I remember being on the meeting where they recommend raising rates, and we didn't raise them because essentially we're paying down, we're using some of our, what we've got in reserve, but we may not even be able to do that a year or two from now. We don't know. And if we do this, we're basically guaranteed we're going to raise rates. And so who do we want to raise rates on? And I think it's completely reasonable for them to ask, because water's high in Bel Aire. It is high, and it makes everybody mad. But when we choose who gets to be mad, we're all mad. So I don't think we can just make. I'm not seeing a compelling reason to make that one person happy when we're all basically all mad about it all the time. I guess that's how I'm feeling about it.
I do like doing something to help development get started and to encourage them to look nice, right? There is an element of, gosh, these new developments, they look really nice and they're attractive for our community, and we need people to come buy our land and build things here. And so I certainly like that we do something, but we have to achieve that balance, and I'm not sure that we're out of balance at this point from what I'm seeing.
I don't think we've got such a problem with the water rate as we do with, maybe we need to educate people when they first come in here that they need to design their lots differently. 100% not Bermuda, but fescue grass is a very bad thing. It takes a lot of water. My last water bill was $175, and I've got dead spots in my yard. So, I don't have a lot of sympathy for some guy that's keeping brand new sod wet over the hottest part of the year. That's just not that smart a thing to do. And I've got a couple of questions here, but on these water bills we're talking about, are they also being charged for sewer, or are they on a meter?
Yeah, so that's the nice part about sprinkler only, is there is no sewer charge, because there is a storm sewer charge, but not a sewer dedicated to watering lawns.
And for some reason, I thought Elk Creek was using gray water.
No, not that I know of.
Okay, because they were right on that pipeline. I thought they had some agreement to tap into that for their irrigation. Do we know if there's any wells available around here?
No,
I've heard different stories. Yeah, some people say it's 200 feet deep, and other people, it's hit and miss, so I don't.
Yeah, I've not heard.
We get that question quite a bit.
Yeah.
Keith Price, our engineer, always tells them you can try, but I've seen a lot of people waste their money on drilling. So we are the highest point in Sedgwick, and
Well, I also know there's some natural springs around, so
you can try.
See if you can find that spring.
yeah. Well, Resurrection Church is sitting right on top of a spring, apparently,
Yeah.
because it's got water problems in the basement all the time.
If I might add, one of the other attachments, this one here, it's a little confusing, but it kind of, and this is just a little bit of education on your part when someone, I think the hard part is they're building triplexes with lots of different units that are all metered. When you build a triplex, you have to set up an account with us to get water. You might only use a gallon of water to show a tenant that you have water for that month, but we charge you our base rates. And that's probably also factoring into his, with Bel Aire, it has high water rates, because you can see they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, soon to be 11 apartments that are going to get hit with a base rate every month. So that adds up pretty quick, because our base rate is tied to our debt. It's gonna hit them. So if we want to look at it, I don't know. I would have to have a big conversation with my utility clerk on how you would be like, okay, so until a tenant moves in, we won't charge you the base. It's all a procedural thing that would be a nightmare, in that once you set up a meter, you need to put it under someone's name, or they could turn on the faucet and forget to turn it off and spill
Well, if I don't,
thousands of gallons. So that's why we do it. You
If
got to
we-
have somebody responsible for that meter.
right, but if we could charge actual usage or base rate, whichever is less, that might help
Yeah.
them out a lot.
Yeah. And those
Until
are
it-
the
until it's sold.
innovative, Yeah.
And that was another question. Are these villas actually being sold, or are they being rented out? How do we decide that they go off of the special water rate?
To rent only.
So those aren't on the special water rate, the apartments themselves, just the irrigation meters.
Okay.
So until, they'll be going off after next billing cycle.
Was your question, when do we know that 75% is complete?
Basically, yes.
I run the calculation.
Well, it says in there here, lots sold, so if you never sell the lot because you're the developer and you plan on renting all the units, does that give you, but you said there's a 4-month limit, so that kind of takes care of that problem, I guess.
Well, I guess if they, I'll talk to Jackie, but I think the intent of the, it would be a legal matter if that's the way it was drafted. I've always took it as developed 75% to a 75% capacity. Because, we could, there could be a
It
lot
does-
of that type of stuff.
It does say or lots sold, so houses
Yeah.
constructed or lots
And I
sold.
just took a snippet of the contract, I can look
Okay.
at it, but.
Well, I'm open to some ways to help them, some creative ways or whatever, but certainly not. I am not convinced that just removing the, just wiping out this, incentive and just making the incentive permanent. I'm not for that. If there's other proposals that are ways to help or creative or temporary or I don't know. I don't know what those are, but I'd be open to hearing about those.
So just a question, better understand this.
Yeah,
These,
I read that while I was talking.
your assumption in this analysis that you've done is that the irrigation-only meters stay on the bulk water rate permanently. That's what this analysis assumes?
This assumes where did I get the $64,000?
Yes. What's
Number.
the assumption behind that?
This assumes, that's what that assumes. And this includes, these irrigation meters include, some residents have dedicated irrigation meters as well. A majority of them are common area and other areas.
Where are
but
those residences?
I can print off the list for you, but.
Are they scattered around the city, or are they?
Yeah.
in
It's either rental property that someone has. I don't know the
Okay,
specifics.
okay.
I just tell it's not a company owning that irrigation meter. It's an actual
Okay,
person.
but you have those.
When,
If you guys want to explore it further, I'm sure the number, the variance is probably, 10,000 one way or the other. I didn't know if you guys wanted me to spend 20 hours of my time doing this, so I just wanted to give you a ballpark figure if you're really serious about looking at it. But I'm pretty sure that it's not going to be too far off of that number based on gallons and consumption.
So are we thinking, I guess I'm thinking, I don't think we need to spend a whole much more time on this unless the developer themselves have some sort of creative suggestion or something that they're wanting to talk to us about or something. I mean, I'm not saying I'm never going to hear it again, but but right now I'm not sure what they're suggesting, and if what they're suggesting is removing this, or continue on this thing, I'm not for it. So I'm not saying I'll never listen again, and if they come back to staff and suggest something, I think I'm willing, but I'm not aware of anything left for us to consider. Am I right about that, or is someone else seeing that differently?
Well, if you give in to the developers on this one, they'll come back and want you to give in again on something else. That's how developers think.
Well, I'm
Anything to
glad
get
they're
their
coming
costs
to us
down.
and talking to us because I do want to have a good partnership with our developers. So I appreciate them coming and at least letting us know that this is a concern because we have an opportunity to consider it, address it, evaluate what our alternatives are. I think what I'm seeing is that unfortunately, water is really expensive, and it's really expensive everywhere in Bel Aire, and it just is an unfortunate thing.
The only other option I saw, and I talked to Ty, and I'll throw it out there, and you guys can, if you're really serious about it, it would be the thing is you'd want to do is look at more of a flat rate structure, and that would move our city away from a conservation structure, meaning we don't have escalating. As you use more, you get charged at a higher rate. I would want PEC to come back in and make sure and run all the projections before we do that. But that's a big shift in talking with our utility advisory committee is all about conservation and helping. So that would be a shift kind of against the wind to try to do maybe let's say a $4 a gallon at any amount. And then hopefully your revenues come in about the same because people either use more water or less. So that's where the big gamble would be. If you wanted to think seriously about lowering the rate, you'd have to switch the mindset and then get some professionals in here to make sure that we're not going to throw all our votes in bad about.
We'd likely be raising the rate on the people that are the poorest, that use the least, that just want to do a little bit, and you're raising the rate. And then the person that owns a lot of stuff and has a lot of financial, so to me, you're like, hey, person that doesn't use very much water, could you help the shift would be, I know it would be even, you could say it would be even this way, but I don't know.
It has the same line of a regressive versus a flat tax. Yeah.
How many people do we have in these higher water tiers?
How many, I'm sorry?
How many accounts do we have that hit the higher water tiers?
It all depends on family size and how much they're using the water. But if you look at, it's hard to slice out just water for me because I look at bills, a total bill, trash, sewer.
Yeah, that's the other problem with the
So
water
that's my big
bills.
problem is
People don't realize
people don't
everything that's on the
realize it's
bill.
all a water bill.
Yeah,
So,
it's a water bill, but it's got all those lumped into it, yeah.
yeah.
So, Ms. Stinson, you had something you
I
wanted to?
did, and this may
Question?
not factor into any of this, but a few years ago, we ended up allowing to have the senior center, or senior complex built up here at 53rd and
Oliver?
Oliver.
Mhm.
And I don't know how many of you remember this, or even if you heard it. At the time they came in and asked for that, they were talking about the water, and they had mentioned maybe a senior rate because it was going to be at the senior complex.
Yeah.
So I'm just throwing this out to you guys. I don't know if you remember that, but I do know
Yep.
that they made mention of it, and I know you did, and you
Yeah.
were here too.
Yeah,
I remember.
I remember that.
So,
Yeah.
just down the road thinking, you may get approached again, but in a different way.
Oh, I know we're gonna get approached again.
Yeah.
And I think
I expect it.
Yeah,
And I think to Dr. Schroeder's comments earlier, I'm going to support probably, at least listening to it, but probably wanting to be consistent across our city in that regard. So.
So I do know the Utility Advisory Committee was not overly excited about us not accepting their proposal that we had talked about a couple months ago. And that proposal was a 4.5% increase per year, beginning 2021. And we said we would look at it year over year and see how we are doing. the reason that they had proposed that was because they knew we're doing this new sewer project at the Chisholm Creek Utility, which is about a $12 million project that got to fund somehow. Okay, so that was their thinking, and based upon somebody, was it PEC that did that study?
Yep.
Okay, based upon PEC study and stuff. So it's, I mean, I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir a little bit, but it is on the top of everybody's mind, and it's almost impossible for us to look at any lowering of water rates unless we can lower debt, and I don't see us being able to lower debt today. It'd be wonderful if we could get there, but I don't see it today. That's the way I see it. Any other questions or comments? So if I'm hearing the group here tonight correctly, we're going to tell them we considered it. Unless you have a specific proposal you'd like us to consider, we're not going to make any proposals. Is that fair assessment?
Yeah, one clarifying question, I guess, that I had for Ted. When people have the separate meter for irrigation, individual homeowners that have a meter for their main usage and then a meter for irrigation, are those homeowners charged two base rates?
So sprinkler meters are not charged base rates. I'll have to, for, what's that?
Don't they just pay for the,
Water base rate, no sewer or
I
anything?
think, and I'll have to double check this, and I'm sorry I don't know, but I just remember a lot of times if you have a irrigation only meter, you're only charged $2 in winter months for the storm sewer. So that makes me think that you're not charged the base rate on irrigation meters. However, let me double check and get back with you.
I would be interested in knowing the answer to that, because if we have, if we have a separate meter to understand, water versus, water usage in the home, which ultimately goes in the sewer, versus irrigation, which doesn't, and just goes potentially in storm sewer to some extent. It wouldn't feel necessarily right to me that a homeowner would pay two base rates just because they've gotten a delineation on their meters.
And I've looked at a lot of data, and I'm pretty sure we don't charge a base rate on that. That might be the reason.
All right, any other discussion? If not, I think we're adjourned.
Wait a minute, you said
Okay.
other, I didn't know if you're still talking about water or
Oh,
other in general.
okay, you have something else to say? All right.
I'd like to ask if you're all still happy with the tax abatement on hoops now that they've listed their business for sale.
I
I
have not
didn't
heard
know that
it.
they listed their business for sale.
It's on Wagand.
The property.
Is that an old, is
The
that an
whole
old listing?
business.
Is it for 10 million?
I don't know what the price was. My wife found it.
Okay, so I think,
It was not for individual shares, which he did discuss possibly doing.
Yeah.
It was for the whole business.
so what I remember, in a discussion that we had with him, Ted and I met with him before he came in, because I had noticed that it was actually for sale, I think it was at the end of the year, last year, for 10 million. And so I asked him what that was about. And he said that that's a pretty good sum, and if somebody offered it, they would take it. But he said that their goal, is what he said here, was to continue operating the business. What they're trying to do is, or what he's trying to do is, Perez Sr. owns 60%, and he's kind of given up, and so they're trying to find somebody to buy him out, or the idea was to sell the building. In talking to the commercial brokers, 10 million is awful high. They said it's probably more valued at 6 or 7. So that's what he told. If we're talking about the same thing, that it was listed for 10 million, I posed the question. That's what he said.
And that would be an old listing. if that's.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's probably a current listing, but I
Current,
think
still
they
current.
listed it maybe a couple months ago or a few months ago.
I don't know, maybe they've relisted it because my wife seemed to think it was a new listing.
Yeah, I don't know, I can look it up and see.
No answers from anybody here except for
I
Ty.
have one more comment. Can somebody buy some silicone spray or oil?
Fix-
I'm the worst. I'm right over. Yeah,
I do that all day
When you're
long.
watching from home, it's like,
Yeah.
I was gonna maintenance guy on that.
yeah, I'll take care of it.
WD-40.
That's one of my hats.
spray tab.
WD-40.
Tear down the community room.
All right. Yeah,
Well,
if
in
it's for
fact, I
sale,
know they've updated the listing because she did say one of the selling points was that they had no sales tax, no property tax on it for the next 5 years.
Well, if they sell it to someone who ends up doing the same thing, then I'm not, and the sales tax abatement is a part of it, and them doing it, then I would, it wouldn't necessarily change if you had a different owner. Is that right?
So there's a couple ways you could, they could sell it and the new owners could ask to have it transferred to them. So that's one option. The other option, if they sell it, then those IRBs go away and then you would cancel it. The IRB, the tax abatement goes away. And then the third option would be if someone bought it as a warehouse in a new business, they could technically come in as a new business and ask for 10 years of abatement. So I guess the first issue is if it sells, that IRB goes away. And if someone wants to assume it, it's up to you to approve.
So in all three scenarios, the council would have to approve transferring the IRB or issuing a new one.
Yes.
So
Even
that's
in the
really
sale
not
of
a
the
sales
corporate
point then.
Yes, so even if there's a name change, so let's say that,
And a name change of the entity? Or,
yeah,
Or just if the corporate entity itself is sold? Because the corporate entity would, in theory, be the one that we issued the IRB to.
yeah, so yeah, let's say the corporate entity sold the building, then that IRB goes away. But let's say, as I mentioned, that they find somebody to buy out Carlos Perez Sr., and they create a new name. Then they would come to you all and say, okay, we have new partners. I'm still in it, but we've got new partners, a new name. We would request that the tax abatement you set up with whatever the company was continues. So yeah, even at that.
Yeah, so is it a partnership? If they issue stock, can they get around that? Because he did say something about selling stock.
Again, it's tied to the business name. So if they sold stock, I think then the business, as long as the business name didn't change, then it stays the same.
So you could sell the whole, I don't know if it's an LLC or incorporated or what entity is, but if you sold the whole business as the business, then those IRBs would remain in full effect. But if you change the name of the business, they don't. Or if you sell it and a new owner doesn't buy the business but buys the building,
Right.
then they don't go with it. Okay.
Yep.
All right, very good. Okay. Anything else to discuss? Very good.
Some date I would like to discuss the trash and recycling truck schedule. They keep coming by my house before 6 o'clock, and I don't like to get up anywhere near that early. And they don't just come by once. They come by my house 4 times because of the way our neighborhood is laid out.
Okay, well, we might put that on the list of something to bring up in the future.
Yeah, I don't know if
I don't know
that's,
that that's within the purview of our governing body.
well, we have put up signs in the past, and we don't let commercial vehicles down residential streets except for certain hours.
So yeah, I actually looked into this for John. Our agreement with Waste Connection says that they can pick up between 6 a.m. and 5:30 or 6 p.m. So technically, you could go back on that agreement and say, well, we don't want trash trucks starting till 8 or 7 or whatever.
Well, they're violating that agreement already, I can tell you that. I know they're at my house at 5:30 in the morning.
Yep, so if
Right.
that's the case, if they're there before 6, then what I could do is just let them know that, hey, this is what it says, but if you want to change it from 6 to 7 or 7 to 8, you'd have
It's usually the recycling, on the recycling weeks.
Yeah, they're the worst.
Oh, the recycling.
Yeah, they're the ones that come early, and they've been there as early as 5:30.
And when they get there that early, we are not the first house on the route, so there's a lot of other houses that's going by first.
So they're jumping the gun on that one. Okay,
Boy, I took over other, didn't I?
you took over.
I'll shut
Anything
up.
else?
So I guess the question is, are you interested in looking at not picking up till after 6, or if we can control them to not get there before 6, we're okay?
Well, I just assumed they didn't get there till after 8.
Okay. They're probably not going to be happy about
Trash
that.
services, I think you'd have a hard time with that one on trash service, but
The trash on the alternate week comes by quite a bit later.
yeah, but he's starting someplace else earlier.
Yeah, well,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so, okay. All right, it's something we could talk about if you want in future.
well, I don't know what we'd have to do about it, and it might be tied to some kind of rate increase for them, but, which they decided not to ask for this year.
Right. I don't think they're good.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I
there
was saying. The original agreement says not before 6. So,
Right. Okay. If nothing else, then we are adjourned. Have a good week, and we will see you next Tuesday.